Welcome, everyone, to the Public Square. I'm Wayne Shepard here with a team whom I'll introduce in a moment. We are sort of cracking the door yet on this new year to see what it holds for us all, but there is a very important issue that needs to be talked about, and we're going to tackle that today here on the Public Square. So, Dave Zanotti is here. Our executive producer is Alan C. Duncan. Jeff Sanders is here. Melanie Elsie, Rob Wolgate, and did I say Dave Zanotti? I think I did, didn't I? Dave, anyway, you're here, right? Present and accounted for?
Okay. Right here, Wayne.
Right, okay. Let's get started, huh? The new atheism.
Well, there's been a couple of stories that have come up that sort of bear retelling on some old stories, Wayne. And one of them is a story, and I'd just like to turn to the team to sort of summarize this for everybody listening today. In regards to Richard Dawkins. Now, I always want to be careful because Professor Dawkins isn't here to defend himself. Though he's been on this broadcast quite a few times in regards to his appearances in public. It takes us back to the God delusion debate that was conducted by radio, which we hosted here on the Public Square. We'll talk about that in a minute. We've actually had some back and forth interchanges with Professor Dawkins in person, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, we got back and forth on an email or a text exchange at one time as well. But the purpose isn't to attack Professor Dawkins. The purpose is to cover some news in which he is a part of that is interesting and surprising and developing. So the new atheism, let's start with the reality that about 20, 30 years ago, this started to crest, and perhaps in quite a remarkable way, Richard Dawkins became sort of the high priest of the new atheism. His book, his original work, The God Delusion, sort of became the top seller. Now, there were a number of other people in the mix at that time and a number of other authors, but somehow, for whatever reason, Dawkins became sort of the go-to guy in regards to new atheism. So we've been involved with this conversation for a long time. Then let's talk about the story that recently just happened. Rob, you've got it. Melanie, you've got it in regards to Professor Dawkins resigning from an atheistic association.
He resigned from an atheistic association because they had published an article that basically talked about sex and biology and how you were born, in chromosomes, and it was defending that male and female. Well, that association unpublished the article because of backlash that they received.
Huh. And the title of the article is Biology is Not Bigotry.
Yes.
Where Dawkins was taking a position that there is a biological distinction between males and females that's scientific.
Well, he didn't even write that article. It was written by one of his colleagues, and all he was doing was just saying, "Hey, you should just have left it up."
Yeah, just leave it up for the debate. Underneath the headline of the article, it says Dawkins accused the Freedom from Religion Foundation of caving to hysterical squeals from predictable quarters and censoring the article.
He always did have a way with words.
Yeah, he is quite eloquent, particularly when he's criticizing. He's got a great eloquence about him. Acerbic.
Now, I was wondering if truth itself is bigotry. I mean, truth is narrow, right? It separates falsehood from reality. I would think he would be in favor of all of that, right?
Well,
and all of the scientists would be in favor of that.
He sure would be in favor of the public debate of it.
Yeah, and I think we need to be careful here to be as close as we can to what Professor Dawkins is trying to accomplish. He's not changing his attitude at all about being an atheist. Mm-hmm. Nor is he changing his attitude whatsoever in regards to his true disdain and really vitriolic opposition to this very hour, to the doctrines, to the teachings, to the message of Christianity. Now, and he is really a walking set of contradictions, which we'll get to in a minute, but that's okay. He's allowed to be a walking set of contradictions. We're not here to judge the man. We're here to talk about the ideas and the position. He is withdrawing for two reasons. One is, I think it's censorship. I think he feels that his colleague is being unfairly censored, which we share a lot of common concerns about. I mean, we can go the whole way back to COVID and so many other places for the last 20 years and seen how conservative thought has been censored in one way or the other. But then there's a second underlying issue, if I'm getting Dawkins correct here, and that is that he doesn't buy the notion that's circulating across many of the groups that associate with atheism and the new atheism, that gender is no longer an element of scientific reality. He is objecting that, if you will, the movement has gone past, what could we say? I think he's saying the movement's gone past science. Now, he's a biologist.
Just jump the shark.
That's his field of study, and he's basically saying biology is biology, and you can't get rid of gender. Are you reading that the same way?
Yeah, I mean this is his field. It reminds me of that famous quote from a few years ago when Ketanji Brown said, "I'm not a biologist," when asked to define what a woman is. Well, Dawkins is raising his hand and saying, "Well, I am a biologist and I can define it, and my colleagues can. And I don't want to be a part of an organization that refuses to acknowledge biology."
Well, he called the removal of the piece an act of unseemly panic because they were caving to what others wanted.
Well, and he wasn't the only one who submitted a resignation. There's a colleague of his, and he's also a professor, Steven Pinker. When he resigned from the foundation, his statement was that the foundation is no longer a defender of freedom from religion, but the imposer of a new religion, complete with dogma, blasphemy, and heretics.
I will say a hearty amen to that, Steven Pinker.
What a classic statement for you.
Well, I mean, when someone's right, they're right. I don't care.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation, you add a hearty amen.
Yeah. I say glory, hallelujah. There you go.
These times are making for some strange bedfellows,
aren't they?
If I may say so.
Thank you, Alan.
There's support from quarters that for just basic truth you never thought that you'd see, and I'm appreciative of that.
Well, and I think that it's important that we take a minute here and think about this, because this is a substantive story, because you have now not just the split among the people that are associating here, which they have the right to free association or to remove themselves from that, but you have a statement. Melanie, that statement, can you repeat what you just read again?
Sure. He said the foundation, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, is no longer a defender of freedom from religion, but the imposer of a new religion, complete with dogma, blasphemy, and heretics.
So the science has been removed and the partisanship on positioning has taken place. Rob, I see that hand.
Jerry Coyne, in his letter to the foundation, said the gender ideology which caused you to take down my article is itself quasi-religious, having many aspects of religions and cult, including dogma, blasphemy, belief, and what is palpably untrue. A woman is whoever she says she is. That's in parentheses, apostasy, and a tendency to ignore science when it contradicts a preferred ideology.
So here's the great irony about this. Ideas have consequences, right? Mm-hmm. We talk about these words don't happen in a vacuum. And this has been, if you'll forgive me to use one of our more often banned words, this has been a movement of thought that we've experienced for 30 years that has consequences. Now, Dawkins is basically saying, this is too far. This is too far. And so are some of his colleagues. So let's roll the clock back just a little bit and see if there's more we can uncover here, Wayne, about what happens when atheism goes too far.
All right, sounds good. We are off and running on the Public Square this week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. And thanks for passing the word along about this program, available on radio, online, and with our smartphone app, the Public Square.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
titled this program, The Harvest of New Atheism, and we are off and running, as I said a few moments ago, with the team here at the Public Square. And let's pick it up. You wanted to build that foundation, you said, Dave.
Well, I want to go back to the God delusion debate that was held in Alabama at the university there. And you and I, Wayne, had the privilege of hosting that radio event and helping it get out to the world. And I was going back looking at old internet connections, going back through history and pages, trying to find people talking. And I found people talking about having listened to the God delusion debate on Moody Radio.
Yeah.
I thought to myself, I wonder, did you keep a copy of that file?
Did I keep a copy? No.
Did we keep a copy? Yeah.
I know
No,
it's
I'm
out.
sorry, I didn't.
I know it's still out there. And the reason I know it's still out there, on Christmas evening, I was with family this year, and a sister-in-law of mine was talking about stuff she was reading, and she was talking about reading Lennox. And she was like, it's just so deep. I have to read it a chapter at a time and then repeat the chapter. And then she said, and I've been listening to a debate that he did years and years ago with Dawkins. So I know those are out there. I was kind of like, it perked my ears up, and it caught me by surprise that she was. And I was like, well, I mean, and that was what, 16, 17, 18 years ago.
I have no idea. I can't remember what happened last week. So you're asking me to remember back that far.
2007. 2007, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, there
All
is. If someone goes on YouTube and types in Richard Dawkins versus John Lennox, the God delusion debate, it should be there. So it's
All
on
right.
YouTube.
We've achieved an enormous amount in the way of understanding. We now understand essentially how life came into being. We don't know the details, but we understand essentially how it came about. There are still gaps in our understanding. We don't understand how the cosmos came into existence in the first place, but we're working on that. The scientific enterprise is an active seeking out of gaps in our knowledge, seeking out of ignorance, so that we can work to plug that ignorance. But religion teaches us to be satisfied with not really understanding. Every one of these difficult questions that comes up, science says, right, let's roll up our sleeves and work on it. Religion says, oh, God did it.
Blind faith can be very dangerous, especially if it's coupled with a blind obedience to an evil authority. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to emphasize, is true whether the blind faith is that of religious or secular people. But not all faith is blind faith, because faith itself carries with it the ideas of belief, trust, commitment, and is therefore only as robust as the evidence for it. Faith in the flying spaghetti monster, much beloved of Richard Dawkins, a delightful idea, is blind because there's no evidence for the flying spaghetti monster. But faith in relativity theory is not blind because there is evidence supporting it. Now, of course, we do not speak of proof. You only get proof in the strict sense in my own field of mathematics. But in every other field, including science, we can't speak of proof. We can speak of evidence, of pointers, of being convinced beyond reasonable doubt. I think it's important in this context to emphasize that science is limited, because there seems to me a creeping danger of equating science with rationality. But what is beyond science is not necessarily irrational. Science cannot tell us, for instance, whether a poem, a work of literature, or a work of art or music is good or beautiful.
Neat.
Good.
The video file is still there.
Yeah, but do we have the specific one that we did for Moody for radio? We'd have to do some more digging.
We'll
for
have
that.
to find out, yeah, because it was actually one of the interesting things about the story was that the hosting organization there was actually in a position of not having a radio connection for this debate.
Right.
And Wayne, because of your contacts with Professor Lennox and obviously your long history of service with Moody, we were able to offer a service which we did gratis. We received no compensation for it whatsoever.
Right.
To be able to bring this out to a wider radio audience, which was a delight to be able to do.
Yeah. And technically, Dave, it was at the leading edge of the possibility of putting something like that on live from as far away as Alabama. I mean, The live broadcasting has been around for a long time, but the technology was just becoming, the digital technology was just coming into its own in those days.
Yeah.
So it was a pioneer effort in that regard.
It was a lot of challenge, and there was also some pioneering going on in regards to the sensitivities of all these players coming together. This wasn't being conducted through a large agency, a talent group, a Hollywood group, or New York group. This was a very decent organization in Alabama that was trying to conduct this, and they didn't, in some cases, know who their friends were and who their enemies were. So, I mean, we behind the scenes, I can tell you that behind the curtain, behind the stage, at the very hour in which all of this was supposed to happen, we were debating among lawyers as to how all the processing would happen so that we would end up in a position where there weren't countersuits or suits that would attend for copyright or this and that. It was a hard deal.
Yeah.
But it got done, and it served a great purpose, and it is still out there today. The conversation is still going on. And, of course, Dawkins was at the height of his promoting of his work at that time, the God Delusion. So the God Delusion debate made all sense. And John Lennox, and they were both brilliant. I thought their performances were both outstanding. And I remember talking to Professor Dawkins afterwards and thanking him for the caliber of his performance. That was outstanding.
I remember the first time we sat in a room with Dr. Lennox was in Chicago for me. Wayne, you brought us together for a radio interview.
I think that was one of our very first programs we did together.
Yeah, right? I remember that. I remember the Cubs game at Wrigley after as well. But I remember being in the studio with Dr. Lennox and just, kind of being blown away and listening to the conversation and knowing I'm going to have to go and listen to this multiple times to get a grasp of it.
Yeah, I was jealous that Rob got to be in that one and I didn't get to.
And John Lennox is still doing what he does so well today. He's still writing books and teaching, and he has a wonderful mind that God has given to him.
So this is kind of where all of this really crested into the public marketplace and became very, again, I don't like the word movement. It just bothers me. But look, this really was a thing. It came on.
Progression of thought.
Yes, a progression of thought that got a lot of media attention and a lot of notice. It was big in academic circles. A lot of conversation was going on about that. Now, I think it's important to go to the background and kind of remember the earliest days of all this emerging. So now we come to the point where Professor Dawkins and Professor Lennox are both getting pretty up there in years. They're both still quite vibrant, and they're both still quite passionate about the things that they believe. And here we come to a fracturing and a breaking inside the atheist community in regards to organizations, associations, publishing, but it goes deeper than that. Look, people can have arguments. Heaven knows churches split on a regular basis. This is the human experience. I mean, relationships are hard and we don't do them well. That's one of the reasons Jesus came, was to try to teach us how to do these things better. And of course, our prayer, our private prayer, is that every one of these people would come to an honest facing of reality with God in the person of Jesus Christ. And we pray for them without judgment. Because our only position in this marketplace is we believe the grace of God has permitted us to see who Jesus is, and that he really does change everything. People have the right to disagree. So there's arguments inside the camp, but this isn't, let's just go gang up on the atheists because now they're airing their dirty laundry. So let's turn the public light on it so everybody can see, ooh, look at this. No, this is fine. People have arguments. We understand that. But it's something more. What got me about these conversations on this particular issue was something Melanie Elsey was presenting to state lawmakers across the country decades ago, when she was talking about the fact that the teaching of evolution was, in fact, a religion. That no matter how you took it, when people would attack intelligent design and say you can't teach intelligent design in schools, Melanie would respond to explain to me exactly how what we're teaching here, even though you call it science, is it when it comes to the question of origins, is it really science or is it a worldview? Is it really science or is it a religion? And now suddenly, people inside the atheist community are asking the very same question. Has their worldview exceeded their science and now become doctrine?
And what was interesting about all of those discussions in policy, we were asking is present both sides. Present the evolutionary side, present the scientifically provable intelligent design side. And I remember at a State Board of Education meeting, one board member saying, but Melanie, because I had given them a video with the scientific proof, and she said, but if we share your video, then we're only presenting just one side. And I said, Mrs. Wise, that's what you're asking all schools to do, is to only present one side. You're excluding this side. We're asking for both. The policy was adopted, and it lasted 3 months because a new board came in the following January and quickly undid it. But at least it was there for a minute.
I remember the debate, and it just has echoes of it was echoing in my mind as I was listening to this conversation in the argument among the atheists. At what point in time is atheism a matter of faith,
right,
not a matter of science?
Right.
And of course, that argument has come across through the intelligent design community wonderfully, because they've asked the simple question of, well, we weren't there at the beginning, you weren't there at the beginning, so how can anyone have scientific authority to say we have proof of what actually happened and how it came to be?
Mm-hmm.
And so this has been the question that's dogged the debate from the beginning. But there's another thing that's dogged the debate, and that's the issue of progress. In other words, as these ideas roll out from the theories in the books and the debating platforms into real life and real policies and real practices, where are they heading? Now, this takes us back to another conversation, Wayne, that we need to have. And it goes back to the year 2003. And it goes back to this question of human identity and gender. And there's a twist in the story now that comes up that brings us right up to the current hour and our good friend George Soros. Now, we call him a good friend because we want to be careful. We're being a little humorous about that. We don't agree with anything that George Soros agrees with, I think. And we've probably been one organization that has tried desperately, from an independent point of view, having nothing to do with partisan politics and political parties, to try to explain to the world just how dominant George Soros has been, particularly in American public policy and in legal practices for the last 20 years. It's been amazing how effective he's been. He has every right to do so. What he has done is legal. And because he's one of the wealthiest men in the world, he has divested himself of billions of dollars to try to bring his worldview into American life and public policy. Well, he's done it exclusively on the Democrat side. And in so doing, he has caught the attention of a lot of people. Now, this story's got lots of layers, so let's just lay it out this way. Just a few days ago, President Joe Biden bestowed upon George Soros the Presidential Medal of Freedom. We'll let that settle in for just a second.
Yeah, okay. A long pause, right?
That's the Presidential Medal of Freedom was given to George Soros. And the Soros organization was quite bold. The Open Society Foundation, which is the anchor organization underneath the Soros empire, was quite bold and quite candid in explaining why they felt George Soros deserved that medal. And I thought when we come back, what would be a good idea would be to read that, because it's going to take us all the way back to 2003 and bring another two names into this conversation that link up everything from Richard Dawkins to George Soros. We're about to visit with Justice of the Supreme Court Kennedy, and even back to our old friend Antonin Scalia.
All right, we will get to that Presidential Medal of Freedom coming up here on the Public Square after I tell you that this program is listener supported, and we sure appreciate your prayers and, of course, your financial contribution to the Public Square as well. It's what keeps us going. We have no other support than you, so thank you for that. And you'll find us online at thepublicsquare.com. right, let's continue with the Public Square today. Once again, the team here is all assembled. Dave Zanotti, Alan C. Duncan, Melody Elsey, Jeff Sanders, Rob Walgate, and I'm Wayne Shepherd. Let's get back to our conversation. We left off with the announcement about the recent Presidential Medal of Freedom being bestowed upon George Soros, Dave.
Yeah, it's a little hard for everybody to put in one sentence with belief, but here it is, and the president has the right to do it, and the Soros organization had the right to accept or deny. They accepted the award and did so with a news release in which, Rob, I think you've got the key operational paragraph of what they were saying, why they think that George Soros deserves the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Yeah, from the Open Society Foundation press release, it states, in the United States, Soros has advanced racial justice, invested in drug policy approaches informed by public health data, revolutionized end-of-life care, and helped achieve one of the most significant civil rights victories in modern American history, the 2015 landmark Supreme Court case securing marriage equality in all 50 states.
So they see him as a civil rights advocate then, right?
Well, that's one of the things that they're pointing out, yeah.
Yeah.
A racial justice individual as well. They've talked about drug policy approaches. I mean, we're all around the table. We're pretty familiar with how George Soros and his organizations have been the cutting edge of progressive policies, whether it's on criminal justice, whether it's on drug decriminalization, whether it's on decriminalization all across the board in regards to supporting prosecutors that don't really intend to put criminals in jail. All of those things, which the end of life care thing is also really fascinating.
That's what stuck out to me, the phrase end of life care. It's not very caring.
Does that mean, does that just mean euthanasia?
Basically, yes.
So
that's what I took it to mean, yeah.
There's an argument in which you could take every single one of those things and flip it on its head and say that the things that he's worked towards actually probably achieve the opposite of what they're claiming to have achieved.
Isn't that interesting? Because it's like when they make a statement, you have to take it at face value and understand that what they really mean is the opposite of what their statement is, like climate justice.
Sure.
Some of those projects that are that they've been funding through the Tides Foundation, they have multiple initiatives, and at least 7 that are listed on the Tides Foundation website. And they describe themselves as being invested in 100 different countries. And they describe their newly philanthropic approach years ago that originally described themselves as working directly with local groups. Although they've given broadly to the ACLU in the United States and Planned Parenthood, they primarily funnel money into local activist groups.
Wow. So the end of life care would be euthanasia, and they're funding Planned Parenthood on the other end,
right?
While we're in a population crisis globally,
right?
And I would argue that a lot of the racial tension that we've seen throughout our country over the past 5 to 10 years is driven by the media and how the media covers stories and stokes racial tension and hatred. Not to say that there haven't been actual wrong things that have occurred in the past 10 years, but the way the media covers things, I think that it has exacerbated racial tensions in this country, not helped them.
And another story that is not covered at all by this would be the decline of American cities into just crime-infested potholes like San Francisco, Portland, Oregon. Who wants to move to downtown Portland, Oregon now? New York City, Chicago, because of the prosecutors funded by Soros who will not prosecute criminals. You can go in and steal up to $1,000 worth of something.
Yeah, you just described Pottersville, basically, a modern Pottersville.
Soros is Potter.
Yeah, we just gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Potter rather than George Bailey's brother. So,
sentimental hogwash.
That's pretty creative. Now, I'm going to take the other side for a second and get a lot of people angry at me.
Ooh, let's go.
Oh, I can't wait.
Oh, yeah, it's not going to be pretty. There was a president who gave Rush Limbaugh the same award.
Yeah.
And I can assure you that people on the progressive left would have been having radio shows talking about this and trying to figure out how to characterize what had just happened in this colliding of realities. The point is, I get it. I'm a strong supporter of Rush Limbaugh, so I'm not in any way demeaning his memory or how much he has impacted so much in this country for good. But what I'm saying is you could imagine the other side. So this award, in essence, has become a very politicized award.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I
so
was
there's no doubt
thinking
about that on both sides.
when I heard that this was going to take place, I thought, well, they're getting back at the right wing because of them giving this award to Rush Limbaugh. That's exactly what I thought a few days ago.
Very possible. Very possible. But there's a little deeper story here that I think we ought to take a look at because of the fact that, the Open Societies Foundation could have said anything about this. They wrote the statement. The pen was in their hand. Mr. Soros was not in attendance at 94 years old. He was not able to, but his family came, and his heirs, who are now running his network, came and received the award. And Open Society Foundation, which is the anchor from which all of the tentacles, and I say tentacles because it is that kind of a methodology of the Soros network and their billionaire cartel and all that they have spawned in the last 20 years. All right? They could have said anything they wanted, and what they said was the most significant victory in modern American history, civil rights victory, the 215 landmark Supreme Court case securing marriage equality in all 50 states. Now, here we started with Richard Dawkins saying atheism and the modern atheistic movement has gone past science and gone too far because they have decided to violate biology. Now we have the funding base, the person who basically hollowed out and bought and paid for and recreated the Democrat Party in the United States through the progressive movement and his funding of it with his billionaires cartel, basically saying their primary, the landmark reason that George Soros should have the Presidential Medal of Freedom is because they created an environment whereby the United States Supreme Court could arbitrarily redefine the definition of marriage for every single American without a single vote of Congress. In fact, overturning a vote of Congress, overturning legislative actions and constitutional amendments in 30-plus states, the Supreme Court by fiat decides that they will recreate the definition of marriage, and that is what they feel is George Soros's crowning glory. Wow.
Wow. Because what we've seen in our cultural slide with all of these gender identity issues now, as George Soros fades off into eternity, his millennial son, Alex, who's 39 years old, swoops in, and he will be taking those actions and successes from their point of view and extrapolating them as we move forward in the future into deeper cultural issues.
This gives, I don't know, is anyone else getting a headache?
Oh, yeah, especially when,
Rob had one before the show
Yeah,
started.
I had one before the show, but this doesn't help it. I think, as Melanie mentioned, you think about his son, Alex, that's who was front and center receiving the award on behalf of his father. And he has made the statement multiple times that he intends to carry on what his father has started and take it even farther than his father did. So they have no intent of slowing down or stopping.
Yeah. And not to be missed here is the fact that Soros has purchased a large radio network, a very large radio network, the Odyssey Network, which includes a lot of the CBS radio stations.
Yeah, they're going after the one place that they have never been able to succeed, which is what you're listening to right now. Long format audio programming where people get together and talk and think and pray together and try to figure out what's best for our country. When we review history, where we ask tough questions, where we try to be fair to people, they don't like that. That's troublesome to them, whether it's being done through podcasting or whether it's being done on terrestrial radio. Soros and the empire want, again, to silence that. Now, there's one other sort of surprise to this story. We got to get to it when we come back.
Okay, all right. That's going to keep me listening, and I hope you as well. So you are listening to The Public Square, which will continue on this station, thankfully.
We will be right back for more on The Public Square.
Okay, you've been listening carefully to the Public Square here today, and we're coming up to a so what moment later in the program, but let's continue talking about where this all is leading us in this culture, Dave.
This is a moment where a voice is coming back from the grave. And that voice is the voice of the late Antonin Scalia. Let's roll the clock back to 2003, 3 years before Richard Dawkins would publish his book, The God Delusion. The Supreme Court had a decision come before it called Lawrence v. Texas regarding human sexuality in Texas and laws regarding sodomy. The court overturned the Texas law, and in that process began a debate among the justices that would ultimately take us the whole way forward into 2015 and even 2018 in a series of cases dealing with marriage. Now, when the first case came up, it wasn't about marriage. It was about sexual conduct between two consenting adults. But very quickly, the rationale that was developed for the Supreme Court to overturn that decision alerted the attention of Antonin Scalia. And particularly, it made the rest of us as court watchers and reporters on these matters aware of the fact that Scalia was trying to tell us what was coming. Now, as additional decisions regarding sexual behavior and then the questions of marriage, and there's about 5 or 6 decisions in this final strain that brought us to Obergefell, which in essence was the ending decision on the court doing a Roe versus Wade, so to speak, on the issue of marriage, taking the decision out of everyone's hands but their own. But in that process, there was a champion for the agenda of the LGBTQ community. And that champion was Republican Justice Kennedy. Justice Kennedy began a doctrine in these early cases, which we basically called the Kennedy Doctrine, which is to redefine human personhood for the purposes of law as in the terms of human sexuality, human sexual practices, or proclivity or preferences. In other words, Kennedy started writing for the court in these opinions that in essence, just like people are identified based on race or based on gender, that there is another, in essence, human reality that defines who and what we are, and that is how we practice our sexuality. That's called, we've coined that the Kennedy Doctrine. Personality equals sexuality. This had never happened before in the history of the country. And as soon as Justice Kennedy began to use the word persons as he was defining people based upon their behavior, Justice Scalia said, now we're heading into the real danger zone, and somebody just stepped on the accelerator. And it didn't take 20 years for Scalia to be right.
Right. Dave, reading from his dissent, he stated, and this is on the Lawrence v. Texas case in 2003, state laws against bigamy, same-sex marriage, adult incest, prostitution, masturbation, adultery, fornication, bestiality, and obscenity are sustainable only in light of the Bowers decision, which was being overturned. Every single one of these laws will be called into question by today's decision. You know, when you think about the personhood and not an act of privacy and a behavioral choice, then you could say that, pedophilia should be protected right. You know, any chosen identifiable aspect of your behavior that says this is who I am as a person puts everything at risk.
Yes.
It's just very deterministic as well. Like it's saying that you are this thing and you have no choice, no control over your own behavior and your own actions.
And the slippery slope on that, as we saw years later when they got into the whole women in sports issues, where on the transgender issues, in the Obama administration, you literally could say, I feel like I'm a woman for today.
I remember when Lawrence v. Texas came out, I just started at the American Policy Roundtable. I remember, Dave, we printed out the opinion of the court. We read it, read Scalia. I thought, man, he's taking this a bit far. And then we had discussions on it, did radio on it, and I thought, man, I don't see it. I don't see the dots connecting the way that Dave's talking about it, the way that Scalia's talking about it. I don't see us getting there. And we were there within
10 years.
Yeah, 10, 15 years. And looking back, I'm like, wow, I cannot believe it. I was a bit naive to think it wasn't going to go at that pace.
Never underestimate the left's ability to take an idea and run with it to an extreme that you would never consider.
Especially with George Soros' money.
Yeah.
They got the award.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question I have also. I mean, if we could have a conversation so honest, and we don't have relational context with Richard Dawkins, so we don't have that honor to be able to get that honest and have that question. But look, based upon what he's saying right now, way back to the top of the show, in regards to that, in essence, the gender ideology has gone past science. Isn't it also true that the Kennedy doctrine has now eclipsed science altogether? Mm-hmm. And now exactly what Scalia said is whatever you feel becomes legal.
Becomes reality.
Well, yeah.
It becomes a fundamental right.
It becomes a right. And when the dots are connected from a legal standpoint, if that's the law of the land, I don't understand. I mean, they're going to defend that none of it can be considered illegal activity. When you look at pedophilia, when you look at multiple wives, when you look at if that's sexual preference and that defines your personhood, how can that be considered illegal? Especially as Dawkins would claim, we went past science. If 3, 4, 5-year-olds are making the decision what gender they are, we never thought we'd be there either. I don't understand how it's going to be deemed illegal.
If that's now somebody's rights because of what they feel, then if you squelch that or you make them feel bad about it, you are denying them their fundamental rights, and you need to be punished.
Which brings us back to the question of civil rights, Jeff, that you appropriately called out at the beginning of this award to George Soros, who his organization is confessing that he is a champion of civil rights. And the apex of that is the decision of the court to basically destroy the legal position of the traditional definition of marriage. Now, you could make a complete defense of the traditional position of marriage solely on biology. You can drop all religious pretense whatsoever. But you see, even Dawkins agrees now that biology doesn't matter. It's religion.
Well, that's why you have to make the argument on all fronts. I think you make the biology argument, which there's a famous debate between Alan Keyes and Barack Obama using biology. Maybe I'll play a little clip of it here.
Mr. Keyes, on the Channel 7 debate last Thursday night, you said, and I'm quoting you, where procreation is in principle impossible, marriage is irrelevant. You went on to say it was irrelevant and not needed. What about marriage between people who are well beyond their childbearing age? Irrelevant? Not needed?
No, it's simply a misunderstanding. The word in principle means relating to the definition of, not relating to particular circumstances. So if an apple has a worm in it, the worm is not part of the definition of the apple. It doesn't change what the apple is in principle. An individual who is impotent or another who is infertile does not change the definition of marriage in principle. Because between a man and a woman, in principle, procreation is always possible. And it is that possibility which gave rise to the institution of marriage in the first place. As a matter of law, as a matter of law
possible in principle.
But when it is impossible, as between two males or two females, you're talking about something that's not just incidentally impossible, it's impossible in principle. And that means that if you say that that's a marriage, you are saying marriage can be understood in principle apart from procreation. You have changed its definition in such a way as, in fact, to destroy the necessity for the institution.
We were just passing around an interview that Dawkins did last year, and maybe we can talk about that when we get back to it. Wayne's giving us the cut sign here.
Oh, you're going to blame me, huh? All right, that's okay. I'll take it.
No,
but if
you're
you have
keeping
to
us on
leave us
track.
now, and a few stations do have to leave, then you can listen to the rest of our program, an important part of the program, as a matter of fact, coming up on The Public Square. Listen online at thepublicsquare.com.
spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the public square.
Okay, Alan, before my rude interruption for the break, you were saying, I'm going to turn it right back over to you, Alan.
Well, Professor Dawkins did an interview last year where he essentially now is calling himself a cultural Christian. Not a Bible-believing Christian.
Not a believer.
Yes, not a believer.
But a cultural Christian, which even that is a stop the presses headline moment. He's saying he would rather live, and he's said this in the past, but now he's using this moniker cultural Christian. He's saying he would rather live in a Christian civilization than any other type of civilization. He holds up Islam in comparison to it and says that he would much prefer to live in a Christian civilization rather than Islam. And I'm wondering if he would now say that he would much prefer to live in a Christian civilization rather than whatever the woke cult of body, amorphism that we're living in now. So, I think somebody should pose that question to him. I think his resignation would indicate that he would prefer that as well. And when I say a Christian civilization, I don't mean one in which every person is legally bound to be a Christian, but one that is built upon the principles
influenced by the Christian faith.
Right.
He's acknowledging what Christianity has contributed to culture.
Yes.
Professor Dawkins, it's very good to have you join us to discuss whether it matters that Christianity is playing a diminishing role in national life. And what would be your Easter message? I mean, I've said a few things. What would you tell the nation?
Well, I must say I was slightly horrified to hear that Ramadan is being promoted instead. I do think that we are culturally a Christian country. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer, but there's a distinction between being a believing Christian and being a cultural Christian. And so, I love hymns and Christmas carols, and I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. I feel that we are a Christian country in that sense. It's true that statistically the number of people who actually believe in Christianity is going down, and I'm happy with that. But I would not be happy if, for example, we lost all our cathedrals and our beautiful parish churches. So I count myself a cultural Christian. I think it would matter if we substituted any alternative religion. That would be truly dreadful.
And what's interesting is while he doesn't use this term in that 8 minutes, he's really talking about the fact that only Christianity builds a platform for ultimate respect of the individual. Now, the commentator tries to pick on American public policy questions in regards to women and say, yeah, but what about? But even Dawkins is in the position of defending on the whole the directional, principled value of the teachings of Jesus Christ. He doesn't use those words. But when we talk about a Christian society, what are we talking about? We're really talking about a Judeo-Christian society, which is based upon loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. Those two fundamental principles create a very different environment. And of course, that's why we celebrate the Declaration of Independence as a country, because our founders recognize that difference.
Hearing Dawkins have that interview, make the claim he's a cultural Christian, and then his resignation here, it makes me think of a C.S. Lewis quote where Lewis says, "A young man who wishes to remain a sound atheist cannot be too careful of his reading. There are traps everywhere, Bibles laid open, millions of surprises. God is, if I may say it, very unscrupulous." So I'm just, I just wonder if maybe God's chasing Dawkins down a little bit here. I don't know.
Well, and I think, Alan, if we put the link to this interview, people can decide for themselves. It's a fascinating brief 8 minutes, and of course, Dawkins says some very hateful things in regards to Christianity. He actually bullies the host and dares her to say that she believes in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And she's really, it says that she feels that she's at a disadvantage. And so it's not comfortable. No one's saying that Dawkins is converted or that Dawkins' conversion is a prize for anyone. No.
Well, it'd be one for him, for sure. But
what we're saying is the premise of what we've been doing here as an organization for 45 years as missionaries to America is that ideas have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, when people tell you, watch out, if you start down this path, you're going to end up over here and out of control. Guess what? They're right. Even Dawkins is saying the atheistic movement in regards to this approach is out of control past science and biology. Now you have Soros standing up taking this award, and his people are saying, yes, the crowning glory of all our efforts is the deconstruction of marriage in Western culture.
And what's interesting, Dave, is if you juxtapose Dawkins with Soros, Soros's methodology is the crowning identifier for this award that he got, because his methodology is to use media to reach what he calls the movable middle audiences, to influence culture in a way that deconstructs it without the individuals knowing that they're being sucked into a deconstructive modality to get everything done the Soros way. Soros and Dawkins are at opposite ends of the same atheistic sort of spectrum.
And I would say, Melanie, that we can put the godless equation into that and the autonomous movement. In essence, they all desired, the platform is, we're better off without the notion of God, even though, for Dawkins, who despises the Christian revelation and says so out loud regularly, he can't get past the benefit of it all. Now, that's interesting, and perhaps that's an interesting manifestation of God's grace. Who knows where that will end up? We certainly pray for him as we pray for our own families. God have mercy on us all.
We've seen it happen before, haven't we?
We have seen it happen before, and C.S. Lewis is perhaps the greatest example in recent history we can speak about. But the point is this: these ideas are going somewhere, and basically the model that George Soros launched of a billionaire cartel, they're just getting warmed up.
No kidding.
We could do hours and hours of programming and showing how they have literally bought and paid for, hollowed out and redesigned and re-implemented the Democrat Party in the United States of America. Now, they've had some pretty good success with some Republicans too. They're in the marketplace. They're on the ground. They're electing prosecutors, state representatives, members of Congress.
Local elections.
Prosecutors.
Local elections.
Local ballot issues, state ballot issues. I mean, on the election side, they're heavily invested. So they're invested in elections. They're invested in the immigration policies. They're invested in the feminist movement. They're invested in.
I bet they're in the military.
Every piece and parcel, every piece and parcel that we can think of that would influence which direction our culture moves. Soros is there invested financially.
So it's too big for us to deal with because they got all the billionaires and we got nothing. And, oh, well, we're just a little minority movement anyhow. So let's just protect our interests, stay inside our churches, and pray for Jesus to come. Or
I go for plan B.
We can meet here every day on the public square.
I like that.
We can meet here and we can pray. And we can study our history and we can reclaim these truths that still exist because they don't go out of style.
Are you saying that God is bigger than George Soros? I don't know. Really?
Yeah.
I think
Last
so.
time I checked.
And as local as he tries to get, he cannot get in between a parent and a child. The family unit is what's going to be the most important piece in saving America.
And everything that we do, every prayer, every contribution, every connected relationship, every time we work to support people in public service, regardless of their political party, every time we fail and get up and try again, we're doing it to bear witness to the fact that there is a reality called truth, and that truth matters. Ideas have consequences.
Well, I want to thank the team for such a great conversation, helpful conversation today, as always, on The Public Square. You can find us online at thepublicsquare.com, and please pass that link around to others who need to hear what we do each and every day on The Public Square.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.